So let's begin with a little meditation motivation, as we have done all the time. I need it especially today. Calm my mind, relax your body, relax your mind, and remembering that you don't have to think about anything else now. Place your attention, first of all, on the breathing. And once you've recognized it, be mindful of it, because mindfulness is a mental factor that keeps in mind something that has already been recognized. Be mindful of it to the exclusion of everything else. Once your mind is calmed a bit of its ideation or conceptualization, the different thoughts going through it, just calm. Bring your attention to your mental consciousness rather than your breathing. If you can recall, if you have a remembering consciousness of the clear light nature of the mind, you can start with that, or start from scratch by recognizing the thoughts are not hindered by the mind. They can come and go. There is no obstructing contact. The mind, by its very nature, even when thoughts are present, its very nature is like a clear light. Like a vast expanse of space without color or shape. Let go of your partial attention to your body, your feelings, if there's some aches and pains. whatever your mind might clamp onto, grasp onto, whether it be appearance or thought process, words, anticipations, mental states, recognize them all as arising within the mental consciousness and turn your attention away from them by asking yourself, what is the nature of the consciousness to which these appearances are arising? And even after some time, the appearance of the clear light nature to your mind, recognizing that too is an appearance, a mental image. So far, we haven't actually directly realized this clear light nature. And even subtly let go of that, as though to go deeper, to actually experience the clear light nature without relying so much on an image of it. This conventional clear light nature of the mind, and of course the ultimate clear light nature of the mind, the emptiness of the mind, are the factors that allow us to become Buddha, to become omniscient, to overcome our faults and develop good qualities. This conventional clear light nature is the developmental Buddha nature. And the fact that we can rejoice now in recognizing it, that we can, giving us the energy, the confidence to overcome our ordinary behavior because we have this Buddha nature. This recognition is due to having a life of leisure and endowment right now, that the Buddha spoke of so many times in the sutras, how rare it was, how meaningful it was, and how it was short-lived, transitory. With this life of leisure and endowment now, rather than using it to accumulate wealth or fame or family, friends, and pleasures that are all transitory, recognizing that we could begin to utilize more of it in our spiritual development, hearing the teachings, contemplating them, and especially meditating on the quintessential points of, say, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom that realizes emptiness. How wonderful it would be if at the time of death we could feel, oh, I've done my best. I've made use of this life of leisure and endowment to the best of my present abilities. May I find such a life again quickly to be able to continue on this path, opening up my heart more and more to others, empathizing with them, feeling the equality between friends, enemy, and strangers, and our equality with them, all sentient beings, and that we all wish to be happy and be free of suffering. No difference at all. We all have the potential to achieve that. We all have the right, the ability to do that. And recognizing all these sentient beings have been our mother, been depthlessly kind to us numberless times before. Even when enemy, even when stranger, besides being friends and family. Feeling some responsibility to repay their kindness. And recognizing simply by giving some material or advice, present, worldly advice now, although useful, when they take rebirth again, that will not be of much help to them. The best thing that we can do to help sentient beings is to be able to lead them out of cyclic existence into a state of omniscience where they achieve their own aim and the aim of sentient beings, because they'll be able to emanate themselves, Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya, to be able to lead sentient beings to that. We ourselves have to achieve that goal. So out of a sense of responsibility and compassion for sentient beings, thinking I must eventually quickly become Buddha, a Buddha, for the sake of sentient beings. To do that, we have to understand the mind. So I'm going to pay attention this morning in listening, contemplating, and even meditating on the topics of the mind and mental factors as one of the many limbs that I have to achieve to reach enlightenment for the sake of others. I'm going to participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's my only goal. And then arising from that motivation, bringing your attention back to the present. So good morning, Ida and Rowena. Oh, there you are. You're actually there. I see. And Rowena, how are you? Everything good? Did you have turkey? You have to unmute.
Things are very peculiar, but if they're fine.
Okay.
Health diagnoses and things. I shouldn't talk to doctors. They're very upsetting, but that's what they are. It's their job.
So speaking of turkey, I mentioned before when a couple of people were here, I've seen a movie on PBS, public broadcasting, which some of you may not have access to, but you may be able to see. It's called My Life as a Turkey. Has anyone seen that? Oh, it's really very interesting. A fellow was who lived in, kind of like me, out in the wilderness, and he was more of an animal scientist. And someone had left, I think, 15 turkey eggs on his doorstep, and he realized this was an opportunity to follow them through their lives. So he hatched them. He ooh, ooh, or whatever sound turkeys make while they were hatching. So they were already imprinted with his voice, I guess you could say, his sound. And then when they hatched, he was the only person they saw. So they imprinted with him. Very, very interesting. So if you get a chance in honor of Thanksgiving, watch My Life as a Turkey. Very, very good. Okay. Any questions? Doris, do you have a question?
Not a question. I just wanted to mention that Bob isn't with us today. We don't have an assistant. So I'm electing Stephen, the VP assistant.
Wow, Stephen. Yeah, it's surprised. Okay, I'm sure he'll be happy to help, right? That's good. Thank you. Also, Shanka, I think, is still in his mini retreat. And David and Karen are hosting some Syrian refugees. So they had mentioned they may still come. I don't know. Maybe they're watching on YouTube afterwards. So, any questions from our previous classes? Some lingering doubts or questions? Christine has one. I see. Yeah. Christine, what's your question? You have to unmute.
Okay. Is rejoicing a virtue? They always talk about it creates merit, and virtues create merit. So what is rejoicing?
So rejoicing is not necessarily meritorious. You can rejoice in killing someone or doing, oh man, I really got them. I gave a zinger, they're humiliated. You can rejoice in non-virtue, which is itself non-meritorious, creates negative karma. But if you rejoice in virtue, you create virtuous karma, depending on the status of the person or the action that you are rejoicing in. If you rejoice in the actions, of someone who is lower than you spiritually, you create more merit than they created. The famous story of this one spiritual beggar outside the gates when a wealthy patron was offering a meal to the Buddha and his Sangha, the monks. And the patron asked so the beggar outside was rejoicing. Oh, he wasn't invited. He couldn't come in, right? But he was thinking, how wonderful to be able to offer to the Buddha and the Sangha, just rejoicing like that. And when the wealthy person, whether a king or some wealthy patron, asked the Buddha to dedicate his merits, the Buddha said something to the effect. I think he did to a certain extent, but he said, actually, the person outside the gates has created more merit than you, because you've done this out of, sort of like having your name mentioned that, I'm a patron of the Buddha and so forth. And but the beggar outside has rejoiced and created more merit than you because he's of a higher spiritual level. So if you rejoice in the virtues of someone who's on the same spiritual level as yourself, you create something similar in karma to them. If you see your Dharma friends prostrating and think, oh, how wonderful, I wish I'd be able to go to Bodh Gaya and do that, or they've created this karma, rather than feeling jealous and so forth, you create essentially the same amount of karma that they create, simply sitting there, rejoicing. If you rejoice in the actions of those who are spiritually higher than yourself, the bodhisattvas, if you yourselves are not already bodhisattvas, I don't know, maybe all of you are, or the Buddhas, you create not as much merit as they have created, but incredible amount of merit. So rejoicing in the virtues of others is, or even rejoicing in your own virtues. You can remember the things that you've done. How wonderful! I took the Bodhisattva vows, or I got up early to take the 24-hour precepts, or I studied Lorig and penance. And whoa, I was hesitant sometime, but I did it. That's great. You create more merit. You can rejoice in your own karma. At the end of our dedication, at the end, when we think, this morning I've created virtuous karma. You can rejoice on that also, thinking, wow, I could have just watched the Steelers playing the Green Bay Packers, or I could have done something else, but I listened to the Dharma, and I've created some merit. How wonderful that is! You can rejoice in your own merits. So that's useful to know. Okay.
Very useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So anyone else have a question or thought? Doris. Yeah.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah.
It's from a couple weeks ago, something you said in the meditation. I can't quote you, so I have to paraphrase. Something about even the bodhisattvas, when they're in the lower realms, suffer. So that got me thinking, like, do they end up there by choice? Is this a choice of a birth that they choose to go to the lower realms?
Yeah, generally, it depends on the level of the bodhisattva. Once you've developed spontaneous bodhicitta and you are actually a bodhisattva in reality, not simply having taken the vows, the bodhisattva vows or something, or having on your identity card that you're a Buddhist, once you're a bodhisattva, you can when you reach the path of seeing, you can actually take rebirth out of choice in the lower realms through the power of prayer. Generally, upon the path of seeing, you won't take rebirth in the lower realms as a result of ripening of your karma at the time of death, because you've overcome what's called the 12-link ignorance. Remember, one of the questions earlier was about the 12 links, and Nadine was asking about 12 links and whether there were any of the mental factors there. So the 12-link ignorance is one which is overcome, the grasping is overcome upon entering the path of seeing. At that point, at the time of death, the grasping, even though you still have grasping to inherited existence, the grasping has been reduced to the point where it will not create throwing karma. And also, the grasping at the time of death will be such that it won't actually ripen any of the karmic seeds that are already on your consciousness. So my mind is become wavering again. Remind me, Doris, what was your initial question here? You were asking what?
Well, I asked if they take this rebirth by choice.
Right. So at that,
what can they accomplish there, really?
So those bodhisattvas can actually make prayers to ripen the karma that's still on their consciousness, that their grasping is not strong enough to ripen. So they upon the path of seeing, they no longer take rebirth in the lower realms. Even before that, there's a point where the grasping has been diminished, that they don't. But at that point, they're definite not to take rebirth in the lower realms by karma and delusion, but they can make prayers to ripen that and take rebirth in the lower realms as a bodhisattva, appearing maybe like one of those turkeys I was mentioning. Maybe it was a bodhisattva, or when you read the Jataka tales, many of the stories of the Buddha, taking rebirth as an animal, as a deer or a fox or something like that, leading the others. One can do that. So it depends to what degree they experience suffering. Their bodies may experience suffering, but their minds may be at ease if they take rebirth in the lower realms. So they don't experience the anguish that we would experience in a similar circumstance. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
Okay. So anger, we had just finished anger, I think, last time, but I wanted to make one clarification. when I mentioned in our text, it says, what is anger? It is a malice towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena that are sources of suffering. It has the function of acting as a support for not abiding in contact and for misconduct. And when I read that, I thought, not abiding in contact. Remember, I said it seemed like a word was missing. Later on, there's a quote from Lama Zo'n Kappa's Lanrim Chemo, and right after that, in the commentary, it says, it has the function of causing one not to abide in happiness in this lifetime. So I said, oh, that must be missing the word happiness, not abiding in contact with happiness. So I left it at that. But I checked the Tibetan, and the Tibetan doesn't have the word happiness. That wasn't left out. And the Sanskrit doesn't have the word happiness there. So that led me to read some other things. And I thought I'd share that with you. In Sanskrit, so in Tibetan, not abiding in contact, remember the mental factor contact? Does anyone remember what the Tibetan was? What's the Tibetan for contact? Rekpa. Rekpa. And in Sanskrit, it's sparsha. Like when you do various kinds of tantric rituals, you offer sparsha, touch, contact, so forth. So sparsha, abiding is in Tibetan nepa, to abide. So rekpa mi nepa, not abiding in contact. In Sanskrit, it's the syllable a, which is a negative particle, right? A sparsha vihara. So sparsha, so not sparsha vihara, not abiding in contact. So it turns out that is an expression that means not abiding in contact with happiness, but the word happiness doesn't have to be applied there. Listening to the teachings of the Buddha, all the various teachings, leaves a certain kind of knowledge in your mind. Say the Bodhisattvas who listened to the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the Buddha said many things that a person who was not well versed in the Buddhist teachings wouldn't make connections, but they understood what he was talking about, sometimes by allusion, alluding to something else. So it's understood here that not abiding in contact means not abiding in contact with happiness, or in other words, it has the function of acting as a support for suffering, not abiding in contact with happiness. So I just wanted to clarify that. I shared that with CG, who I've been sending some typos to, and she was happy. She's like a real Dharma geek, right? You might think, there's a kind of trope on the TV programs nowadays that all of the programs about crime dramas, they always have some geek who does the computer stuff, right? And the other people, like there's one I like, CSI, was it not CSI? NCSI, the Jethro would always, get frustrated when the geek would be telling them the reason this is this and this and this. Just cut to the chase, just tell me this. So we are Dharma geeks. CG is a Dharma geek, so she's happy to know the details of these things. And I hope that you find at least some pleasure in knowing these things. You won't just say, I don't need to know. I don't need to know that. Okay. So anyway, anger has the function of acting as a support for not abiding in contact. There's also, when we do the general confession, does anyone know the general confession? It's a confession that was written by, I think, Arya Sura or Ashvaghosha, I can't remember which, early Buddhist saint, who himself wrote this confession to help purify his disparaging of Buddhism early in his life when he was a Hindu, when he was a Vedic adherent and disparage the Buddhist teachings. And in that, in the end of the text, it says, by revealing and confessing, all these things that I've just confessed, I will abide in contact with happiness. Not revealing, not confessing, I will not. So that's sort of like reminding oneself at the end the importance of revealing to your own mind. It doesn't mean you have to state your faults to everyone else, although that's good. But just coming to grips, I've created these things that are bad. Coming to grips with that helps to purify negative karma. So that phrase, I will revealing and confessing, I will abide in contact with happiness. That's kind of expression that's used. And so that kind of abiding in contact has that kind of sense, even not mentioning the word happiness. Make sense? Okay. Christine, you were thinking something. Yeah. Okay. So we more or less finished anger. Hopefully, that'd be nice, right? We finished anger. So now, ngagel, pride. What do other people call it? Self-importance, some people call it, but generally we call pride. It's a mental state that's an inflated state of mind and creates negative karma. So the question posed by the Abhidharma Samachaya that he answers is, what is pride? It is a puffing up or an inflation of the mind in dependence on the view of the transitory collection, which we haven't mentioned yet. We haven't defined the transitory collection yet, just in general terms. It's coming up. It has the function of acting as a support for disrespect and suffering. So as a result of pride, you have a mind which disrespects others and creates negative karma. You may remember me mentioning several times in the past, there's an expression in Tibetan that in the in the springtime, the first grass grows in the lowest valleys. And as the summer progresses, it begins to grow along the sides of the hills when they get warmer, but it never grows on the snowy peaks, the snow mountains. The grass is too cold up there, so too high. So the implication of that is that realizations grow first in the mind that's humble, that has countered pride, that has overcome pride, doesn't allow pride to enter. Because everything you hear, you understand as a teaching. It's not like, oh, I've heard that before. They made some grammatical mistake if the teacher is giving some teaching. It doesn't impact your mind the same way. So pride is a puffing up or an inflation of the mind in dependence on the view of the transitory collection. It has the function of acting as a support for disrespect and suffering. As is said above, it is a mental factor that has the aspect of puffing up. Let's see how they are. What's the other hand? Inflated rather than puffing. Say, inflated image. An inflation of the mind upon observing the basis for this inflation. One's own wealth. Oh, I'm a wealthy person. Those other people are, one's own qualities, say one's complexion, one's beauty, one's, other kinds of qualities, one's intelligence. I'm smart, they're not, so forth. It's an inflation, or what was the other word I said here? Inflation or exaggeration of one's own qualities the Lanrim Chemo, the great exposition of the stages of the path, says pride is based on the view of the transitory collection. So not all of the delusions are based on that, but they all arise as a result of the view of the transitory collection, which is grasping to an inherent existence of oneself. What did I say? Yeah, so pride is based on the view of the transitory collection and is a puffing up, an inflation of the mind upon observing an external or internal phenomena that is high or low, good or bad, and involves the aspect of loftiness. You know, pride has that sense, right? Making sense so far? Yeah. Independence on the view of the transitory collection is specified because all pride is generated in dependence on the innate conception which thinks I. Because you're thinking the pride has that sense of identifying the I as being somehow superior to others. Pride is of 7 types. So the way it's translated here, pride, exceeding pride, pride beyond pride, pride of thinking I, pride of vanity, pride of slight inferiority, and wrongful pride. So these same 7 in the same order in Geshe Rafton's book, Steve Batchelor translated this way. Lesser pride, that's just what we call here pride, number 1. Greater pride, which is, our text says, exceeding pride. Extreme self-importance. So our text calls it pride beyond pride, because in this text, pride is translated as self-importance. Then egotistic self-importance, that's the pride of thinking I. So thinking of the egotistic self-importance or egoistic pride of thinking I. Then what is called pride of vanity here is called full-blown self-importance. What was that? All cylinders running, right? Full-blown self-importance or pride of vanity. 6th, Geshe Rafton's text is self-effacing self-importance. Here it says pride of a slight inferiority. There's a slight difference between, this is the only one where these have a slight difference in meaning. And then what our text says, wrongful pride, you could call it distorted pride or distorted self-importance. So let's go through those. What does that mean? So our text says pride is an inflation or puffing of the mind, thinking that one is superior to lower persons. That's general pride, Somehow I'm better. I'm from a better family, or I'm white. They're not white. Like is very current in our society in the United States now, sort of a basis for racism and so forth. I'm of a noble family, or I am, and I am a Churinoff. You hear oftentimes in stories, or maybe you find in life someone telling you have to act right because you are a so and so, you are a Jones, or you are a Rockefeller or something like that. Pride is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one is superior to lower persons. Exceeding pride is a puffing of the mind, inflation of the mind, thinking that one is superior to peers. So in your group, you don't necessarily, you're not recognized as, you're part of the group. You're not necessarily superior to them in the sense of the first one, the pride that feels superior to lowers. but somehow still you feel you're the best of your peers. Centering on that, okay, you may be the best of your peers, and there may be some valid reason for that, but the mind that grasps upon that, exceeding pride is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one is superior to one's peers. Pride beyond pride is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one is greatly superior, even to other superior beings. So one kind of pride, I'm better than the lower, I'm better than my peers, I'm even better than those that are higher than me. The way that that's explained in Geshe-Repton's text, the third one, greater self-importance arises in relation to so that was the second one. Extreme self-importance takes as its object those who are superior to oneself, and considers, even compared to those who are who have greater social standing, greater wealth, knowledge, etc., than myself, I am nevertheless superior. So those are common kinds of pride. Then we go into more detail. Pride of thinking I, or pride of self-importance. Pride thinking I is inflation of the mind, or puffing of the mind, thinking I within observing the appropriated aggregates. Remember this term, appropriated aggregates? Ida, do you remember that phrase? The appropriated aggregates? So why are they called, Stephen, do you remember why they're called our aggregates, our own aggregates? Why are they called appropriated?
I believe they've been appropriated by self-grasping.
Right, okay. Well, so in the Bardo state, before we've taken these aggregates, before we've appropriated them, our consciousness is in the Bardo state, enters into the fertilized egg, and then as soon as that happens, it's like, me. You've appropriated that. Like, it's like, what is it called? Squatters in New York? Or do you have squatters in New Mexico or Canada? I don't know. You've appropriated it. This is my place. It was never yours from the beginning. It was like mother's egg and father's sperm that you've appropriated. And then the aggregates that arise. So first of all, you appropriate the form aggregate, right? And then the other aggregates are more in line with what Stephen was saying, that you appropriate them in thinking they are mine. So this other text says, this is number 4, right? This conceited attitude, this pride of thinking I, is an inflated state of mind that results from imagining one's aggregates of body and mind to be something perfect. It then strongly conceives of that which is not a self-existent person to be a self-existent person, and that which does not belong to such a self-existent person to belong to such a self-existent person. So in other words, mine. There's a difference between me or I and mine, right? Do you know the difference? I have a conception of I. You have a question, Charlotte, Chrissy? No.
I was just going to say possession, the difference. I and mine, possession.
Right. And so actually, when we say mine, in the phrase I and mine doesn't actually refer to the possessions. Like I've got my MacBook Pro in front of me here, right? My MacBook Pro. It doesn't, in that case, doesn't refer to the actual possession. It refers to the state of mind that is considering it mine. When you talk about I and mine. Think about that for a second. So if you ask for an example of mine, you could say my computer, but the actual mind, the state of mind that thinks my is part of the ego grasping. Because when we grasp to the ego, the self, we grasp to a sense of I and a sense of mine, M-I-N-E, right? So what does that mean? The sense of I is just as though there is a self-existent person, I, that is behind everything. The grasping to mine, again, doesn't mean you're grasping to the MacBook Pro or whatever, your clothes, your wealth or whatever, but it is the state of mind that is thinking mine in relationship to those things that one encounters. It's a subtle point, to a certain degree, gross enough, subtle enough, but it's worth investigating and knowing. So pride of vanity is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one has a, what did I just say? Four, sorry. Pride of thinking I is a puffing of the mind, thinking I, or mine, within observing the appropriated aggregates. Then 5, pride of vanity is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one has attained that which one has not attained. Here, Geshe-Rapnan's texts, just slightly different words, but getting to the same point. Negative human qualities, that is to say, all activities that arise from attachment, hatred, and bewilderment, are countered by the superior qualities of mental absorption and meditation. Full-blown self-importance, or here we're calling pride of vanity, is a grossly inflated attitude of one who, without having realized any of these spiritual qualities, superior qualities, is convinced that they have. So in other words, you're convinced that you've attained what has not been attained. Can you think of an example in that in everyday life? You know, what do you think, Christine? Yeah.
Yeah, like when I have a realization, I think I really have that realization and it's not contaminated. You know, I think it's a pure realization.
Yeah, right. It would probably better to say that rather than saying that I had when I had a realization, say when I had some insight.
Insight. Yeah, it's not even a realization. You see, there you go.
Some kind of feeling. Right. Oh yeah, I got it.
Right, but I don't really
thinking that you've actually realized it or something like
right.
that. Okay, so then 6, pride of slight inferiority. Am I in the right place? Pride of vanity, pride of slight inferiority. So here's where the difference is. So here our text says, pride of slight inferiority is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one is just slightly lower than others who are actually greatly superior. You know, you listen to the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche say, yeah, they're superior to me, but I'm not so far behind. Having pride in that. Does that make sense? Here, Geshe-Rapnan's text here, it says this. So instead of in slight inferiority, it says self-effacing self-importance. This is an inflated state of mind that considers, since I have only a fraction of the social standing, the knowledge, and so forth of those who are superior to me, I am truly humble and insignificant. There's a little bit different take on it, right? It's like thinking, you know, I'm somehow taking pride in one's inferiority. There's a, we used to tease Dr. Nick. Do you know Dr. Nick? Dr. Nick Ribush? Some of you know. So he would sit in the back and, you know, take the aspect of being the lowest of all, and we teased him that he had this kind of pride of inferiority. Actually, maybe he had a sense of being superior because he would be critical of other people, but he would take that kind of pride of being the lowest. Okay, wrong pride, wrongful pride, or distorted pride, or self-importance is a puffing of the mind, thinking that one has attained excellent qualities when one has actually gone astray. For example, having conceit about having attained excellent qualities when one has actually been possessed by a spirit. Also, the scripture on discipline, one of the Vinaya texts, says, to be made conceited by what is actually a branch of shame. To be proud about things that are actually shameful. Just as has been said, this pride is, for example, for an ordained person, having neglected the stipulated boundaries of the Vinaya code, broken your vows, as if he is a lay person, conceitedly thinking that he is benefiting others out of his attachment, but actually out of his attachment to gain and honor. These definitions are arranged according to what is taught in the Treasury of Knowledge, the Abhidharma Kosha, right? However, the Precious Garland explains them as follows. So Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. So pride is these seven are well known, but the way that they're defined is a little bit different. In the Precious Garland, Nagarjuna says, pride is of 7 types. I shall explain each of them. Regarding these, being conceited that one is lower than the lowly, or equal to the equal, or greater or equal to the lowly, is called pride of selfhood. Being conceited that one is equal to those who, maybe we should say whom, by some quality are superior to oneself, is exceeding pride. Being conceited that one is superior to the superior, thinking that one is higher than the very high, is pride beyond pride. Like sores on an abscess, it is exceedingly virulent. Sores on an abscess, right? Can you imagine that? You have an abscess, and then on top of that, there are sores. It's just like exceedingly virulent. Conceiving through obscuration, as a result of one's own obscuration, conceiving an I in the 5 empty aggregates, which are called the appropriated. Remember, the aggregates are called appropriated for various reasons. They're appropriated before birth. You take them as your own, like you're squatting, and they are appropriated because you have created the karma to have them, to appropriate them. Conceiving through obscuration and I in the 5 empty aggregates, which are called the appropriated, is explained to be the pride of thinking I. Thinking that one has attained fruits not yet attained is the pride of vanity. Praising oneself for committing negative actions is known by the wise as wrongful pride. Deriding oneself, saying, I am useless, is pride of lowliness. Such is a brief description of them. So you can go back and forth between these two explanations, and it can give you a better understanding. It's not exactly clear which, all of them, but there's a general, you can come up with a general understanding. Pride is a function of obscuring any new attainment of the Dharma, of scriptures and realization, due to its disrespect for those who possess excellent qualities, causes rebirth in bad migrations in future lives, and even when reborn as a human, acts as a cause for rebirth in a low caste, as a servant and the like. So having pride now creates the cause to be born lowest, even as a servant of servants in the future. So one of the famous stories in the Lan Rim is one of the maybe, I can't remember, king or king of the God realm, having great pride, being higher than everyone else, in their next life, being born not just as a servant, lower, but a servant of servants. Like these English dramas on TV. What is it like? Was that the famous one on PBS that was on for a long time? Some wealthy family that have servants, but those servants themselves have a hierarchy. There might be some servant who serves them, right? So being born in that position is kind of the result of having very strong pride. Therefore, it produces the undesirable in both this and future lives. So the Precious Garland says, through being inflated comes all bad lineage. So if you're born to lower caste, let's say, you're not born to a wealthy family and so forth, partially some element of that is due to one's pride in past lifetimes. Through being inflated comes bad lineage. Through jealousy, little magnificence. So as a result of being jealous of other people's qualities, as a result of that, you don't get those qualities in the future because you have jealousy rather than rejoicing in them. You have even less magnificence in the future. Through anger comes discolored face. We can say bad complexion, like not nice color, not nice complexion. Through not questioning the wise comes stupidity. So all of you, I don't think any of you have that fault because you have many questions. Not that I'm wise, but that you have questions. These are the results for humans, but prior to all of them, there is a bad migration. So in other words, these klesha, what did we say? Pride, jealousy, anger, stupidity, what would we say? Non-inquisitiveness, not wanting to overcome one's unknowing, not wanting to overcome one's bewilderment. These are the results for humans, but prior to all of them, there is bad migration. So as a result of these throwing karmas, we are born in the lower realms. And finally, it says the Lanrim Chemo, the stages of the path to enlightenment. I'm not sure, it doesn't say the great stages. I'm not sure if this is the middling or the great. Since pride is the greatest hindrance to developing the path in this life and is the cause for becoming a servant and the like in future lives, abandon it. So it becomes a cause, is a hindrance to developing the path in this lifetime, like the expression about the grass grows first in the low valleys. So realizations first arise in those that have a humble mind. Because you listen, even strangers saying something to you, someone who you might otherwise think as lower than you, you realize some nugget of wisdom there. There's something that even if they complain to you, there's something that you can, rather than just discarding it because you're better than them. In the 8 verses of Training the Mind, it says, what is it? In connection when meeting others, consider oneself to be the lowest of all and hold others supreme and dear. The second verse of the 8 verses. So that's one of the great downfalls, shortcomings of the Bodhisattva, possible downfalls, is developing pride so that you don't consider others as worthy of your attention. How are we doing? Okay. So now, the big one, avidya or marigpa. Ma means negative, right? Ma rigpa. Rigpa we talked about in low rig. We said rigpa means knowing, so it means you could say it means not knowing, marikpa, right? Negative. Vidya. Vidya means, in Sanskrit, means knowing. The syllable a as a prefix is in that context is also negative. So avidya. Regarding ignorance, the compendium of knowledge, the Abhidharma Samuccaya, so the higher Abhidharma by Asanga, says, what is ignorance? It is an unknowing of the three realms. Here it just says it's unknowing. It has the function of acting as a support for the arising of wrong ascertainment, doubt, and afflictions with respect to phenomena. So you may remember I mentioned before that of the 6 root afflictions, the 6 root delusions, remember I said there were 5 that were not views, and then the 6th one, which called view, afflicted view, there are 5 varieties of that. So there are 5 non-views and 5 views, right? In that context, views, say from the Hinayana and from the Abhidharma Samuccaya point of view, which is the Chittamatra system, not the Madhyamaka system, and among the Madhyamaka, not the Prasangika, but the Asanga's view that is exemplified in the Abhidharma Samuccaya is mainly from that Chittamatra point of view. We've got the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, Madhyamika, and it's of this one, the Chittamatra point of view. Here it's said in our text, views, the 6 afflicted views are distorted wisdom. They are wisdom. They're actually wisdom, the mental factor wisdom, but having come to the wrong conclusion. Thinking that there is an I based on some kind of analysis or just innate kind of assumption. So in this context, this kind of marikpa is not considered to be grasping to true existence. Whereas in the Prasangika, if you were to see an explanation of this mental factor, marikpa, ignorance, from the Prasangika point of view, that is also a distorted wisdom. It's grasping to the inherent existence of the self and of all phenomena. But because our text is written from this, not from the Hinayana point of view, not from the Vaibhashika or Sautrantika, but now from the Chittamatra point of view, not from the Prasangika point of view, still for Asanga, ignorance is simply an unknowing, not knowing. Okay? So as has been said above, it is the mental factor of unknowing that is obscured regarding the mode of abiding of all phenomena. It is of 2 types. Obscuration, that is the mental factor of unknowing, and 2, an awareness that apprehends erroneously. So here, Kachin Yeshi Gelsen's adding that comment. So the text by Asanga, the Abhidharma Samuccaya, doesn't say it is of these 2 types. It just says it is an unknowing. But now Kachin Yeshi Gelsen is sort of hedging his bets there by saying it's of 2 types. It's unknowing, but it's also a wrong kind of wisdom that apprehends erroneously. From among these 2, the explicit intention of the compendium of knowledge explains ignorance to be the mental factor of unknowing, right? Since Acharya Vasubandhu also explained it in this way in his discussion of the 5 aggregates, a text that I've mentioned to you a couple of times before. Art Engels has a translation of that, which I've quoted before. Sensacharya Vasubandhu also explained it in this way in his discussion of the five aggregates. The assertion of both the Sangha and his brother agree. However, Dharmakirti, Acharya Dharmakirti, remember who Dharmakirti was? What did Dharmakirti write? Anyone know? Oh, I see some eyes clicking around. Ida, do you know what Dharmakirti wrote? Rowena? Stevens almost got it. It's on the tip of his
I'm
tongue.
gonna guess. I think so. Dharmakirti wrote one of his most important works was to write a commentary on Dignaga's, I think, clear words.
On Dignaga's, well, Amidhamma's, I think, on his Pramana Samuchaya. So Dharmakirti's commentary was called Pramana Vartika. Pramana Vartika. So it's one of the great texts that bridges now. Remember Vasubandhu's text, Abhidharmakosha, was talking about the Vaibhashika system from the point of view of Sautrantika, sort of criticizing a little bit the Vaibhashika. Dharmakirti's text of these four systems, say Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. Dharmakirti's text is talking about the Sautrantika and also integrating a little bit of Chittamatra in some of it. So a lot of his explanation about low rig was in accordance with the Sautrantika, but in some things he was talking about from the Chittamatra point of view, higher view. So he says, however, Acharya Dharmakirti asserts ignorance to be an awareness that apprehends erroneously. In this way, although there are two types of assertions with regard to ignorance, the assertion that it is a wrong conception and the assertion that it is an awareness that does not realize, it's sort of like the opposite, the order there. The first one is like, the second one is like not knowing, and the first one is like wrongly conceiving something, wrong wisdom. This is the order there, they just changed. Both are alike in asserting that the principal antidote to ignorance is the wisdom realizing selflessness. Ignorance is of two types: ignorance that is obscuration with respect to actions and their results, and ignorance that is obscuration with respect to the meaning of suchness. Remember what suchness, we mentioned suchness is a synonym of emptiness, right? The way things are, they are such, they are thus. So in one sense, you could say that if you didn't talk about emptiness, you could say that ignorance causes us to get involved in cyclic existence because it's obscured with respect to actions and their results. It's an unknowing that your actions will have karmic results, and therefore that ignorance causes you to create the karma, which throws you into cyclic existence. The second one, ignorance that is an obscuration with respect to the meaning of suchness, prevents you from understanding emptiness. Not just prevents you from understanding karma and its effects, law of cause and effect. So one, the ignorance that is an obscuration with respect to actions and their results causes one to accumulate actions for rebirth in the lower realms. The ignorance that is an obscuration with respect to the meaning of suchness causes one to accumulate actions for circling in the good migrations. Remember when we talked about contaminated actions, contaminated virtue. You can create virtuous actions that are contaminated by ignorance, and that they're virtue, they're meritorious, they cause you to be born in the upper realms and even to have contaminated happiness in the future, changeable suffering, what we call changeable suffering. not real happiness, but because it's been contaminated by ignorance. So the ignorance that is an obscuration with respect to the meaning of suchness causes one to accumulate contaminated virtuous actions that cause one to circle in the good migrations, or to be in samsara, in the good migrations. Its function, the function of ignorance, is specified as acting as a support for the arising of wrong ascertainment, doubt, and afflictions with respect to phenomena, because other afflictions arise in dependence on ignorance. The famous quote in Aryadeva's 400 stanzas says that just like the body sense power pervades the entire body and all the other senses, that even pervades the eye sense faculty, the ear sense faculty, the nose faculty, the tongue faculty, the body faculty, in the same way that it pervades all that, ignorance pervades all of the other delusions. Because other afflictions arise in dependence on ignorance. In dependence on them, that is the afflictions, actions arise. So first of all is ignorance. As a result of ignorance, we create the other afflictions. As a result of them being present in the mind with the mental factor sempa, intention, we create actions. In dependence on actions, all sufferings in cyclic existence arise. That's the direct cause, karma, right? The karmic seeds that are left in our mind streams as a result of actions, all sufferings in cyclic existence arise. Therefore, all afflictions and faults arise in dependence on ignorance. It's going back to the source. The immediate cause is karma. They're caused by afflictions. When the mind moves with that affliction in it, that is caused by, what did we say here? Going backwards. All suffering arises from the karmic seeds. The karmic seeds arise because of actions. The actions arise in dependence on the klesha, and the klesha depends on ignorance. So worthwhile going through that sequence to see that how all of these things are related to one another. Ignorance gives rise to afflictions, afflictions give rise to contaminated actions, and they give rise to all the sufferings in cyclic existence, even the contaminated happiness. As it is just as been said in the commentary on Dignaga's compendium on valid cognition. So this is what Stephen was remembering. Dignaga wrote the Pramana Samuchaya, compendium of valid cognition. Dharmakirti wrote his commentary on that, which is called Pramanavartika. It doesn't use the word Pramanavartika here. It just says, just as has been said in the commentary on Dignaga's compendium on valid cognition, which means the Pramanavartika, one who sees the self will constantly adhere to it as an I. Due to this adherence, sort of strong grasping, one will crave for happiness, and due to that craving, faults will be hidden from view. All faults have as their root the view of the transitory collection. That is ignorance. So from Dharmakirti's point of view, ignorance and the view of the transitory collection are the same. They overlap. Ignorance is maybe more extensive. Because it includes not knowing other things. All faults have as their root the view of the transitory collection. That is ignorance. From it, attachment arises. From that, hatred and so forth arise. The Buddha himself taught that the cause of these faults is ignorance. So sort of in a certain sense, ignorance is the root of cyclic existence. All faults have as their root the view of the transitory collection. So those are two famous positions. I mentioned before, Nagarjuna said the root of cyclic existence is ignorance. Sort of even in a more Prasangika point of view than Dharmakirti is talking about it, it's grasping to the inherent existence of all phenomena, whereas Chandrakirti in his Madhyamakavatara said the root of cyclic existence was the view of the transitory collection, which we're coming up to. View of the transitory collection is kind of a subset of ignorance. In brief, this ignorance is the root of circling in the three realms of cyclic existence. Since it is the basis for all actions and afflictions, ignorance is taught at the beginning, from the very beginning, is taught at the beginning of the 12 links of dependent arising. So Nadine, who memorized the 12 links this last week. So the first one is marikpa, ignorance. Okay. Any doubts? Actually, very vast subject, ignorance. And if there is a difference between ignorance and the view of the transitory collection, remember, from the lower tenets, that is, especially the Hinayana, maybe even Dignaga in the sort of bridging the Chittamatra and the Sautrantika views, the afflicted views are wrongly directed wisdom. And so the five non-views, say ignorance is a non-view, right? We had 5 non-views. Ignorance, what are the non-views? Ignorance, attachment, hatred, anger, pride, and deluded doubt, right? Afflicted doubt. Those are all called non-views. They're said from the lower tenets not to be distorted wisdom. But from the Prasangika point of view, even those are distorted wisdoms, especially marikpa. So now the next one, doubt, or we could say afflicted doubt. What about doubt leading in the right direction? Is that this root delusion? No. So what is doubt? It is being two-minded with regard to that which is true. It has the function of acting as a support for not engaging in the class of virtue. As been said above, it is a mental factor that wavers between 2 points within observation of the 4 truths, cause and effect, and so forth. This doubt hinders all virtuous activities and especially hinders the seeing of truth, since it will be overcome when one sees the truth. It is said to be a thorough entanglement that is an object of abandonment of the path of seeing. So when we talk about thorough entanglements, you see note there 27, the 3 thorough entanglements are the view of the transitory collection, the view holding bad morality and contact as supreme, and afflicted doubt. Here the word afflicted doesn't come in our text here, but it's to be understood. Let me read you what Geshe Rapton says here. He says, afflicted indecision. So indecision is another way of translating doubt, right? He adds the word afflicted. Afflicted indecision, afflicted doubt is a wavering, indecisive state of mind tending toward an incorrect conclusion. Our text just says being two-minded with regard to the truths. Almost sounds that would also include doubt leaning in the right direction and equal doubt. But from a finer point of view, it only includes doubt leaning in the wrong direction. Afflicted indecision, afflicted doubt is a wavering, indecisive state of mind tending toward an incorrect conclusion about such important points as the law of karma and its results, actions and their results, with regard to other important topics like the Four Noble Truths and the Triple Gem about whether past and future lives exist and so forth. So, maybe former lives exist, maybe they don't, they probably don't. That's called afflicted doubt. Maybe enlightenment is possible, maybe it isn't, probably isn't. That's afflicted doubt. Just being doubtful about whether these things are true, not leaning in the wrong direction, is not necessarily this root delusion. Okay. Nagarjuna even praised doubt, saying that due to doubt, if you have doubts, that can impel you to investigate further to overcome those doubts. Okay. How are we doing? Rowena, you okay? Yeah, okay. So then, afflicted views, tawa nyunmong chen. Nyunmong chen means afflicted, having delusion or being a delusion. Tawa means view. So in general, views are not necessarily afflicted views. We can have a right view, like in the Eightfold Noble Path, we have right view, correct view, right? So all views are not necessarily afflicted. Afflicted ones are the bad ones. So there are 5 afflicted views. The view of the transitory collection, the view holding to an extreme or extreme view, what do we call it? Yeah, extreme view. Generally, conception of bad view as supreme, conceiving other bad views, these bad views as supreme. I'm going to have to take a break again. Anyway, afflicted views, view the transitory collection, view holding to an extreme, then the conception of bad views as supreme, that it only includes certain of the bad views, thinking that these other bad views, wrong views, are right. I'm correct. You have people that think that way. 4th, conception of bad ethics and modes of conduct as supreme, which was just mentioned previously. In the Hinayana, this is considered very, very important. Talking about sometimes criticizing the Mahayana, thinking that, generally this includes, the Hindu ideas of consciously experiencing negative states, like sitting between the 10 fires. Do you know what the 10 fires are? So a fire in front, you build a fire in front, one to your left, your right, and back. That's 4, right? Then the subsidiary directions, that's 8 altogether, right? Then the sun above, and I think maybe they sometimes sit on ashes, hot embers and so forth, as though experiencing all of this suffering of heat will burn up one's negative karma and one can thereby attain moksha. Buddhism, although we, by say practicing nyungne and other kinds of practices, one experiences suffering, but for a different reason. And so that doesn't fall into this wrong view or conception of bad ethics and modes of contact as supreme. And then the 5th deluded or afflicted view is called just wrong view, just by itself. Not all of them are called wrong view. They're all distorted or afflicted, but they're not all called wrong view. So first one, view of the transitory collection. Jikta, jiksok, in more words, it's jiksok la tawa. Jik means transitory. Sok means collection. Like we say, Sangye Chodang Soki Chognang La, to the assembly or collection, the Sangye Chodang Soki Chognang La, Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi, that verse, right? Sok means collection or assembly. Also, when we make the Sog offering, the Gana chakra during Guru Puja and so forth, it's called Soki Korlo. So Jiksokla Tawa, view of the transitory collection. The Abhidharma Samachaya says, what is the view of the transitory collection? Answer, it is an endurance, desire, intelligence, conception, or view, which views the 5 appropriated aggregates. That means those that are your continuum, the form aggregate, feeling, what? Discrimination, compositional factors, and primary consciousness, that collection, those are called the appropriated aggregates. It views the 5 appropriated aggregates as a real I and mind. Mine, I and mine. It has the function of acting as the support for all other views, all of these other afflicted views. In fact, acts as a support for pride also, we saw when we talked about the definition of pride. So this is from Asanga's Abhidharma Samachaya. Remember, sort of bridging Chittamatra. It's a Mahayana text as opposed to Dignaga, Pramanavartika, which more tends towards Sautrantika, but is a little ridged with Chittamatra. Now this is more from the Mahayana point of view, but still not the Madhyamaka, not the middle way view of the higher tenets. So it says it is a endurance, desire, intelligence, conception, or view which views the 5 appropriated aggregates as a real I and mine. So according to this definition, what's the referent object of the view of the transitory collection? What's the object that it's observing? Stephen, what do you think?
The person.
No. According to this definition, it's observing the aggregates. And sort of like a little bit more like Hinayana point of view. It's observing the aggregates and thinks that it is a real I and mine. Well, so when we say mine, what would mean, like arm is mine, is part of your aggregates, right? Eyeball, nose, my nose, views them as real I and mine. So the Prasangika point of view is different. It's more aligned with what Stephen is remembering. The view of the transitory collection for the Prasangika doesn't view the 5 aggregates and conceives them as a real I and mine. It views the conventional I and conceives it to be inherently existent. Its referent object from the Prasangika point of view, that's not how the definition is stated here, though. This is from the Chittamatra point of view. From the Prasangika point of view, the view of the transitory collection views the conventional I and conceives it to be inherently existent. And you might say, well, why is it called view of the transitory collection? It's just viewing the I, right? Conceiving it to be inherently existent. Why? What is the I? How does the I actually exist? It's imputed upon the transitory collection. So the transitory collection is still sort of the basis for this. As a result of having the transitory collection, you impute I, conventionally existent person. If you conceive of that person, you're not conceiving the aggregates, in this case, from the Prasangika point of view, the aggregates are not its referent object. It's referring to the conventional I and conceiving it to be inherently existent. Okay, so let's continue with what the text says. As been said above, the view of the transitory collection is an afflicted wisdom. Remember, I said, according to these tenets, not the Prasangika point of view, but according to these, the difference between the 5 non-views and the 5 views of the 6 delusions. So the 6 delusions are the 5 non-views plus afflicted view, right? That is expanded into these 5 afflicted views. So the difference is that according to the lower tenets, only these 5 are wrongly directed wisdom, afflicted wisdom that's coming to the wrong conclusion. It is so the view of the transitory collection is an afflicted wisdom that observes the appropriated aggregates and apprehends them to be a real I and mine. Regarding this, since transitory, the word transitory means impermanent, right? When we say jikpa means transitory. What does transitory mean? That means impermanent, changing moment by moment. And collection is manifold. That means something that is multifaceted. The basis which it views is simply phenomena that are impermanent and manifold. So according to this definition, not the Prasangika definition, but according to this definition, it views a manifold collection of things, the 5 aggregates, which are themselves impermanent. Why does the word impermanent even come in there? Because from the Vaibhashika point of view, the sort of like the basic kind of ignorance is grasping to a permanent, partless, and independent self, right? Permanent. So recognizing that the aggregates are multifold, not single, partless, and independent, it counters that kind of, the language comes from that very basic kind of Hinayana presentation of ignorance, that ignorance grasps the person to be permanent, partless, and independent. So here we're talking about, instead of permanent, we're talking about impermanent, transitory, and collection that counteracts the idea that it's single or partless, permanent, partless, and independent. So since transitory means impermanent and collection is a manifold, a multiplicity, the basis which it views, the view of the transitory collection, its referent object, is simply phenomena that are impermanent and manifold. However, one designates the name view of the transitory collection in order to indicate that a permanent unitary person does not exist. The name comes from that, So it's sort of used through the Hinayana, through the Sautrantika explanation, through the Chinamatra explanation, and applies in the Prasangika explanation. But from the Prasangika presentation, it doesn't mean that you're viewing the transitory collection. You're viewing the I, which is imputed upon the transitory collection, as being inherently existent. Here, the Abhidharma Samachaya explains the synonyms, endurance, and so forth in the citation above. So why is it said, what do we say here? What is the reason for calling, the definition says, it is any endurance, desire, intelligence, conception, or view which views the 5 appropriate aggregates as real. There are 5 synonyms there. So why does it say these 5? The Abhidharma Samachaya says endurance is mentioned because since it does not fear the erroneous meaning, it is called an endurance. Generally, when we talk about patience or endurance, same word, patience, that we've talked about before. One of the divisions of patience is being patient with difficult to understand Dharma concepts. Being patient, sort of having that endurance to endure even though you don't fully understand, just to keep on going at it. Here it's an opposite kind of endurance. It is an endurance meaning the positive sense of endurance means enduring in trying to understand something which is correct. Here there's an endurance or patience that does not fear the erroneous meaning. It doesn't fear that there is a permanent, partless, and independent self. Since it seeks the erroneous, it is called a desire. Desires generally, if we talk about attachment and so forth, it's a desire for something which doesn't really exist the way that the mind imagines it to be, right? Since it thoroughly discriminates that object, it is called a wisdom, or here she translates intelligence. So it's a misdirected wisdom. Since it strongly adheres to that object, it is called a conception. So remember when we talked about selflessness, there are two important things: the appearance of the I, how the I appears to the mind, and then how the mind reacts to that appearance. Does it believe that appearance? Does it believe that the person dressed in Santa Claus's outfit is actually Uncle Charlie, or does it believe that it is actually Santa Claus? Adherence means grasping to that as actually true. Since it observes the object, it is called a view. The view of the transitory collection that has the function of acting as a support for all bad views. This is the basis of all of the other four of the five views, right? The view of the transitory collection. In Guyadatta's text, a text by a guru called Guyadatta. What does Guyadatta mean? Does anyone know? Bestowing the Guya, the secret or the esoteric, Guyadatta. Guyadatta's text called Expression of Realization of the Seven Maidens. It says, when will we eradicate the view of the transitory collection, the mother of all views, and no longer desire the enjoyments of cyclic existence? It's kind of like longing for that time. Oh, when will that come? When this view of the transitory collection is divided, there are 20 types of view of the transitory collection. So this comes up in Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka also, when we talk about when you elaborate the five, when you elaborate the view of the transitory collection, there are 20 types. Viewing forms as a self, the view of the self as possessing forms, the view of forms as mine. So again, it doesn't actually, when you're viewing the forms, when you're talking about mine, you're not talking about thinking of the form, you're thinking of the form as being mine. The view of the self as abiding in forms. Those are the four basic ones. Similar, due to the division into four, each with respect to feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, and consciousness, you can say viewing feelings as a self, viewing the self as possessing feelings, viewing feelings as mine, the view of self as abiding in feelings, and so forth. Same with discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. Those are called the 20 divisions of the view of the transitory collection. It's worth knowing. I remember when we were studying Abhidharma's when we were studying Abhisamaya Alamkara, the commentary to the Prajnaparamita with Geshe Tekchok at Manjushri Institute. At that point, our course was still called Geshe Program. Since then, the Golukpa Society didn't allow Westerners to get the title Geshe just through that kind of study. But at the time, it was called Geshe Studies. And for the final exam, I remember Thupten Pende, one of the monks at the time. Now he's out. You know, Royena, you know Thupten Pende? Yeah. You know, Thupten Pende was a monk, and he memorized, I think there were 173 aspects of something. He memorized a whole list for the final exam, and there was no question about it on the final exam. he was quite disappointed he'd gone to so much trouble memorizing. So you might think, oh, these 20, maybe George is going to sneak these 20 on the final exam. Well, I would say you could just memorize just that first, viewing forms as a self, viewing the self as possessing form, viewing forms as mine, viewing the self as abiding in forms. And then you could just remember that because there are 5 aggregates, you have to multiply these 4 by 5 more, so you get 20 altogether. In Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, there was one king who was his buddy, right? He says, it is taught that form is not the self does not possess form, the self does not abide in form, and form it does not abide in the self. Realize likewise the remaining 4 aggregates are also empty. That's sort of what I was saying. Furthermore, in the Majjhimaka Vatara, the supplement to the Middle Way, this particular sort of bridging verse 144 and 145, sort of some lines from one, some from the other. Form is not the self does not possess form, the self is not in form, and form also is not in the self. Thus, all aggregates should be known in these 4 ways. These are asserted to be the 20 views of the self. The Vajra realizing selflessness destroys the mountain of views. These high peaks in the huge mountain range of the view of the transitory collection are destroyed together with the self. What is that talking about? You know what the Vajra is? What a Vajra is? What is a Vajra? Donnie, what's a Vajra? Do you know? Oh, it's Rowan is holding it up.
The diamond, Vajra diamond, it's that implement that goes
Right.
with the belt.
Rowena is going to hold it up again, right? So actually, the word Vajra comes in the Vedic tradition. I can't remember who it was. There was a fight between 2 of the gods. Maybe some of you remember the origin of the word Vajra. So one of them was getting the upper hand, and the other was helpless. And he prayed to another one of the gods, what could help? And that other god said, well, I have blessed the bones of one rishi, one saint, so that his skeleton will become immutable. So you should make an implement out of his skeleton, and it will be immutable. You'll be able to destroy the other god who's attacking you. So he did, and so he took the ribs, like what Roy, hold up that Vajra again, if you don't mind. So it looks like I can't put my finger there. So put your finger on the ribs there. Okay, that was kind of like the rib cage. He fashioned it together in that shape, and that became called the Vajra because it was indestructible. Okay, so that terminology, because it's common parlance in India at the time, the Buddha appropriated that terminology and talked about Vajra, something which is indestructible. So when we talk about the Vajrayana, the tantric path, is indestructible union of 2 things. You know, you can say wisdom and compassion, or you can say, illusory body and clear light mind, many stages of sophistication of what Vajra means in the Vajrayana. But here it says the Vajra, that's kind of meaning this indestructible wisdom, in this case, realizing selflessness. That's going to destroy everything else, like the Vajra of the Vedas, right? The Vajra realizing selflessness destroys the mountain of views. Can even destroy Mount Meru with the Vajra. These high peaks in the high mountain range of the view of the transitory collection are destroyed together with the self. The 20 views of the transitory collection are said to be subsumed into two: conceptions of I and mine. This is very, very, very important. When we talk about the view of the transitory collection, it doesn't just view the self to be inherently existent, let's say from the Prasangika point of view, but it views that which one thinks of as mine as inherently existent. This inherently existent mine. What does that mean? Again, it doesn't mean the things like my MacBook Pro or your car, my car or this. Those are maybe illustrations of mine, but they are not what is meant by mine. Mine is just from the subject point of view, not the object. The mind that thinks, the mind that thinks mine. My computer, my face, my this or that. So it is the 20 views of the transitory collection are said to be subsumed, included into the two, the conception of I and mine. If you wish to understand their identities in detail, you should know them from the root text and the self-commentary of the Compendium of Knowledge, so the Abhidharma Samuccaya, as well as Tsongkhapa's Illumination of the Thought, his comment, that book called Gompa Rapsel is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the Madhyamaka Vatara by Chandrakirti, the Illumination of the Thought, and his explanation of the supplement to the Middle Way. So Lama Tsongkhapa wrote several texts on emptiness. It's said that if you study these texts, the ones that he wrote on emptiness, you'll know everything you need to know about emptiness. So what are they? Here it only mentions two. It says Tsongkhapa's Illumination of the Thought. That was Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to the Madhyamaka Vatara, Chandrakirti's text. Chandrakirti's text was commenting on Nagarjuna, right? So this is sort of that. Then his illumination of the explanation. It just mentions one here: Illumination of the Thought, explanation of the supplement to the Middle Way. That's Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to Madhyamaka Vatara. But Lama Tsongkhapa also wrote the Lakton Chemo. You know what the Lakton Chemo is? What's that, Stephen?
Middle length, Lamre?
No. Lakton means Vipassana, right? Lakton Chemo is the wisdom chapter of the Lanrim Chemo. That's just because it's so big, it's called Lakton Chemo, or the great explanation of Vipassana, meaning how you realize emptiness. So that's one. Then also his middling Lanrim explanation of emptiness, the wisdom chapter of that. And also his commentary, commentary to Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. And then finally, his text on the explanation of the interpretable and definitive. Those 5 texts are said to be all you need to know about emptiness from the Gelugpa point of view, because he approaches it in many different ways. So if you want to know more, you should look at those texts. Okay. So then finally, view holding to an extreme. Tarta, not finally. This is the second. This is extreme view. So what does extreme mean? Well, extreme as compared to the middle, the madhyama, the middle way. Extreme views. What is a view holding to an extreme? It is any endurance, desire, intelligence, conception, or view which views the 5 appropriated aggregates as being either permanent or annihilated. It has the function of hindering definite emergence by means of the middle path, the middle way. Definite emergence means what? Emerging from psychic existence, achieving liberation. It hinders that view. So the extreme view is, idea that the self that exists endures, sort of like at the time of death, that it continues to exist into the future life, or that at the time of death, it is annihilated. There's no self after this lifetime. Those are 2 extreme views. Here it says in Geshe Repton's text, an extreme view is an afflicted state of intelligence that, when referring to the I and mind conceived by the view of the transitory collection, regards them in an eternalistic or nihilistic aspect. These are 2 extremes into which we are liable to fall once we have assented to the sense of a self given to us by the view of the transitory collection. So if you assent to the view of the transitory collection, you believe there's an inherently existent self, or I and mind. The extreme of eternalism and nihilism. The extreme of eternalism is that which we consider in which we consider our personal identity to be something essentially unchanging, which will survive death and continue indefinitely. Many people, in the Hindu tradition or something, they think the self continues. The extreme of nihilism is the view in which considers that although a personal identity is present now, at death, as well as any element of consciousness, will cease completely. So eternalism and nihilism. Eternalism meaning that the I will, conceived by the view of the transitory collection, continues indefinitely, or the other nihilistic point of view is that at the time of death, that I ceases. How are we doing? Any last question? Christina, you have a question.
Yes, you emphasized several times the real importance, very, very important, you said, is to understand this difference between viewing, the I versus viewing the transitory collection and the prasamgika and the lower tenets, right? In terms of ignorance. So
Yeah.
I don't quite get the subtlety though. Why is that so important? What's the crux of that? Why is that subtle distinction so important?
Well, I made a couple of distinctions. We talked about the I and mine, the view of the transitory collection and so forth. To really understand and to realize emptiness, you have to understand what our basic ignorance is right now, what our basic problem right now. The basic problem to start out with is the view of the transitory collection. So from the Prasangika point of view, what is that doing? It is a mind, so the view is an aspect of the mind, is a kind of an ignorant consciousness that is observing what appears to be an inherently existent I. When you search within your mind, what is I? You remember someone criticizing you and the rise to something, oh, me, I. that appears to the mind. That's one aspect that's important to recognize. It's called the recognizing the object of negation. The other is how the mind reacts to that appearance. Does the mind say, oh, that's ridiculous? That doesn't exist. That's just like a reflection or something, like an illusion, like the appearance of the moon in a pool of water, or like an echo. It appears one way, but doesn't exist that way. That's not what the view of the transitory collection is doing. The view of the transitory collection adheres to that, believes that, grasps to that as true. So there are many, many facets in realizing emptiness. Once you realize what's happening, then you can start to eradicate this ignorance by using, flawless logic and scriptural citations and studying emptiness for a long period of time. So difficult subject.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I want to end here, already a minute over, but we will continue next week and the week after. Hope maybe we'll finish then, but we will finish. Well, I'd like to give an explanation of this. And still keep in your mind, if you have some kind of, courage, and you have some kind of sense of embarrassment and shame, it would be good to take the final exam. A few of you took the final exam before, but hopefully more will take now. Hopefully we'll have it done in time that you can do the exam before Christmas, so you can just forget about it at that time. Okay, so as we mentioned at the beginning, let's dedicate our merits. We made a motivation at the beginning, sort of like the impetus that created virtuous karma during this whole class. We tried to have virtuous states of mind and concentration, listening with a critical mind during the class, so we created virtuous karma. So we've created this morning maybe more virtuous karma than many people create in their entire lives. Wow, as Lama Zopa likes to say, wow. That is so amazing. Rejoicing in that fact creates even more virtuous karma. Rejoicing in the virtues that we've created, rejoicing that Christine and Stephen and Ida and everyone was creating virtuous karma creates even more virtue. Think that this will ripen within cyclic existence infallibly as something pleasant. Virtuous karma ripens, but it may ripen in a way that doesn't necessarily benefit us spiritually unless we dedicate it to that end goal of our eventual achievement of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. May this merit become the substantial cause of my spiritual realizations from now until reaching enlightenment, become a cause of my enhancing renunciation, realizing bodhicitta, realizing the emptiness of inherent existence, bringing together those realizations with the aim of achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Due to these merits, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead each and every sentient being into that very same state. It's said that the law of cause and effect is infallible. So by your wishes, by your prayers, by your dedication, you've created some cause of your future enlightenment now. You've gotten one step further. So thank you very much for your patience. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. See you then.